Thank you. Good evening. It's such a huge pleasure to welcome you, as Heather said, to our very first Tarragon Talk. It's an immense pleasure. It's one of my favorite parts of this theatre, in getting a chance to talk with incredible collaborators, artists through our season and beyond. I want to always preface with a little bit of a bio for both of our guests. I will pull up from a very recent bio. And it's always a bit of a nerve-wracking experience for guests. So please, I will try to do the best job at honoring all the incredible work you've done. From the very left is the incredible Paula in teal. Paula Wing is a translator, playwright, dramaturg, and teacher. Wow. She has upcoming plays of a translation of Stefano Massini's Intractable Woman at Brandeis University in 2025.
Yeah, that happened in the spring. Yep.
Incredible. Mm-hmm. Roadkill, a play for teenage audiences with Rosny. And just last year as well, Wicked Nix at Young People's Theatre, which we'll chat a little bit about today.
Okay.
Paula is also a resident educator here at Tarragon Theatre. We're very, very delighted to work with Paula across many outreach programs, and so we're indebted to her. She's also been a store consultant for the Calgary Stampede Museum, wrote the program notes for all productions at Soulpepper Theatre for 15 years. Her teaching has taken her across provinces, Griffin Trio's Listen Up program, and educator at Young People's Theatre as well.
Yep.
Many others, the University of Windsor, and across the province and beyond. And over here is Gregory Prest. Why I'm a little bit shaky today is I feel a huge serendipitous moment that both of these people to my left have been mentors in my life. When I went to school, Gregory Prest was assigned a mentor to me from the school, and your kindness has always stayed with me. But now I look to you and I go, oh my goodness, now I'm speaking with Gregory. And Paula was one of my first mentors back at Young People's Theatre when I was an emerging artist. And so to both of these artists, I just feel a little bit of nerves, so to say. But Gregory Prest is an incredible legend in the theatre already. For Soulpepper Theatre, he's done over 40 productions on stage.
Wow.
Both in the Academy and then many afterwards. Alligator Pie, to many that I'm sure you've seen. Recently, he's also been the director for De Profundis also, and the writer at Soulpepper Theatre. Rose, Hosanna, Heidi Chronicles, these were all credits as a director at Soulpepper beyond him just being an actor there. Other acting credits include Humor Me, The Bidding War last year at Crows, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and The Inheritance at Canadian Stage, all within a very recent time. Other playwriting credits, including the incredible Bremen Town that you're all here to see tonight, is Oscar Wilde in Jail, was one of the co-creators for Alligator Pie, and also the E.E. Cummings in Song, which was a Soulpepper piece that also traveled to New York City. You also recently did Casey and Diana, sorry, it just struck me, at RMTC and Aquarius Theatre. And so I'm so excited to chat with both of these incredible artists across their many hats. In this particular conversation, we're chatting with Gregory as the director and writer, and Paula as the OG original dramaturg on the production. So to start us off, I just wanted to ask, Gregory, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's been an incredible multiple iterations and chapters leading to what our audiences are going to see tonight. Could you share a little bit about that journey from its original commission at Soulpepper into some of its various stages, and then how Paula was a part of that initial idea?
Sure. So I started working on this maybe 10 years ago. I trained as an actor, and I worked as an actor, and I wanted to write a play. And so I started scratching away at this idea, writing some scenes, developing some characters, and wrote 40 pages, invited some actors in to read those 40 pages, and then left it for about 2 years and let it sit in the drawer and picked it back up again. And that's been kind of the story of the piece. Then eventually, I'd written quite a bit of it before Soulpepper commissioned it officially. Okay. And then I think that's when when you came on
Yep.
as dramaturg, and we did a few weeks of a workshop here and there, reading the next year, like that, a long time. And then most recently we did a production of it at the Next Stage Festival, which is an extension of the Fringe Festival. So we did this in the fall of 2023. And so that was, a Fringe production of this play just to try it out, because I knew, it's a large cast, and it was at a time where theaters were looking for great two-handers. And so I thought the only way I'm going to see this up in front of people is if I, take a chance and put it up myself. So with the help, Soul Pepper contributed a little bit, and I had an amazing team. Many of the actors who you see tonight sort of worked for very, very little, and but we had a successful run at the Next Stage Festival, which opened the door to this opportunity here.
Thank you, Gregory. And Paula, what was that like when you first received the call to work with Gregory on that commission?
Well, I've known Gregory a long time, so I was very excited that he was moving into writing, and I was really excited by that he was looking at a Grimm's fairy tale, but taking that fairy tale into a world completely created by him. And so there are things from that play that, even from those early workshops, that every time they're like a bell that rings in me when I see the show. I think grunkohl and potatoes and various things that stayed. It's amazing to look at a script over a long time and see the things that are the true original vision. And it was beautiful to be in a room with people who were so excited about it. And so the work was really interesting, and we would take long walks and chat about things. And so I was very excited to work on it, and I learned a lot about, I would say, about how you can take something and move it into something much larger than that. It still has that root, that taproot of that story, but there's a huge world around it now, I would say. And I saw the beginnings of that expansion, I would say.
Absolutely. Talking about that root of the story, such a beautiful image for it. Thank you, Paula. What drew you to that initial pull to the Grimm's fairy tale?
Well, so kind of two things. Like, this is a story based on the Bremen Town musicians, which is one of the famous Grimm fairy tales, which I grew up with as a kid. Mostly the images for me, the donkey and the dog and the cat and the rooster all stacked on top of one another. That's the iconic image. So I was interested. I don't know which came first, the idea to adapt this story, or the impulse to work on a play that kind of scratched away at sort of the existential fears of what happens when you outlive your use and no one wants you around, no one cares to hear from you, even though you might be an expert in your field. You are essentially out to pasture. So these two things, and that was brought up in many conversations I had with my parents, my grandparents, friends of mine, and just sort of that thing that was rattling around in my brain. And so I don't know which one came first, but they kind of connected in a way that made sense to me. To explore, to use the format of a fairy tale, which is simple and naive, but try to really dig at really complex real life things.
100%, thank you. In researching for tonight's talk, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole of fairy tales to talk about sort of those morality, the lessons on how fairy tales are used as a way to teach. And so I also wanted to ask you, Paula, on Wicked Nix, which was at Young People's Theatre last year, that being adapted from a novel, quite literally a fairy tale, or a tales of fairy.
Yes, he was a fairy, yes, that's true, yes, yeah.
So what did that lend to you in adapting it for the stage? What was the draw in a fairy tale?
It's really interesting because the writer took me out for breakfast last Saturday to give me a gift for the production. And she said, "Why did you adapt the book?" Because people said to her, "What was it that," and I think it was the fairy tale, the same thing Gregory's talking about, that yes, it was a fairy tale. It's about a fairy who doesn't know where he belongs, who thinks he's a fairy, but maybe he's not. It was that, but also that it looked at the real life issues that kids have with who am I? And what if I think I'm something, but everybody bullies me and acts like I'm not that? What does that mean? And how And I want to say that it just occurred to me when you were talking about it, that you said to me one time, really early, the first workshop or something, I see it all in my head. And you described to me what you could see, and when I saw it at Next Stage, I thought, it's what you told me. It's what you told me, that you saw, you had that initial vision. And I think for Nix too, I could see it. I could imagine it on stage. I could imagine kids watching this child work something out. Yeah. And it is, in a way, you can't say what it is that makes you go that. You just, you feel the appetite to do it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Something that I'm loving from hearing both of these is that there's such an intergenerational truth to fairy tales in both of these adaptations. In that form of story, you're speaking to such a spectrum of age and life experience. And in both plays, a question that keeps on popping to me, and literally from a study guide on Wikinex, is how do we adapt to change? And how do fairy tales allow us to perceive that? And so I'm curious, in both of your experiences working on Bremen Town, but also in your own work, how do you adapt to change as an artist?
Poorly.
Or what do you wish? You know, but...
I think it's a really excellent question, and the thing that the characters in Bremen Town wrestle with so movingly, this issue of who am I if I'm not the housekeeper of Hexenhaus? Not Hexenhaus. Folksenhaus. Hexenhaus is a witch's house. I was like, oh, not right. But that incredibly profound question. And I think, with the hair, that I have to fight against the fear that should I sit down? Should I just sit down? Am I done? Is that, and people call you and you think, thanks, because there is also something I love about Bremen Town. There is that in our society that, okay, why don't you go and do some, knitting or whatever, and that you still feel this artistic desire, you still feel the need to create. And I think I'm trying to adapt to that change of being a more senior artist as gracefully as I can. I was telling Mike, I was in a school a few months ago, and I stepped out of a classroom, and there were two boys on the wall, 10 years old. They're sitting down doing a project out there, and I came out, and both of them went, and one of them said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're still alive." And the other one said, "What are you, 80? And I said, "Actually, I'm 92. But it's that thing of how you're seen as opposed to how you see yourself,
right.
So I'm stumbling through that, I would say. Thanks. I don't know. How do you deal with change?
Not very well, but also, I think as I'm getting older, I'm trying not to attach myself to anything. Anything that, an idea of anything. Attach myself to an idea of something that's not concrete, that's not relational. I can have relationships, and I know that my relationships exist, but ideas of things, I just try to detach from that, just because once you create an identity, that identity has to be destroyed at some point, and I'd rather not. I'd rather have an easier time destroying it than.
Thank you.
How do you find change?
Oh, it's the hardest thing. I don't grapple with change well, but I also feel like we're all living in a world of great change in the moment, of constant change.
Moment-to-moment change,
and I feel like theater and a chance to chat amongst ourselves together is one way I've been coping, is to ask it and talk about it frankly. And I also feel Bremen Town demands that of me when I watch it. Demand seems like a very laborious word. Gently coaxes that out of me in a most fun and delightful theatrical way.
What I find funny in my own way, is the inability to change. And it's such a human thing to not be able to change, to want to or to not want to, and then to not actually be able to. Most of the time in Bremen Town, early, when we were working on it together, even rehearsals, we just end up telling stories about our families. And one of the stories about my mom that I share, which is very much of the play, but of the humor around it. I had these pair of Blundstones that were oxblood Blundstones, and my mom saw them. She said, "I love those boots so much, Gregory." I said, "Oh, they're Blundstones." She said, "I just love the color so much." I said, "Well, you know what? They come in different sizes if you wanted. We could get you a pair." She was visiting Toronto. We're from Nova Scotia. I said, "We could go and get you a pair." She's like, "Oh, no, I could never wear those." I said, I think you can." She's like, "Oh, no, I couldn't wear that." Because it was too not her. These oxblood Blundstones, which are the simplest things in the world, were not her. And the thing that happened, in the panic that happened at the proposal that she might try these oxblood Blundstones was so great that she shut down. And I just find that so funny and human.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
I wanted to ask a similar question, but in a different vein. You both wear many incredible hats across the theater disciplines: playwriting, directing, dramaturgy, education. I wanted to ask, how did you navigate those changes and shifts? Because when you dramaturg and work with Gregory, the playwright, I'm sure you also have a sense of each other's capacity in all of the ways that you hold the art. And so I wanted to ask you, through your career, how have you navigated the change of the hats?
It's really interesting because it's. I mean, I think for me, I'm easily bored, and so the fact that I can switch keeps me engaged, and I'm coming at something from a different angle. It's fascinating as a writer to be next to another writer. And there are things you'll go, "Oh yeah, don't worry about that," whatever. And then other things come up that this writer has to wrestle with themselves, or they have to find their way through. You want to say, "Do this," but you have to, you have to embrace their vision. And I find that helps my vision not to be too closed. So and even working with kids and doing what they think a play is, what they think drama is always really interesting to me and keeps me alive, That's what I'd say. It helps, all of them feed each other. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and I feel like the majority of the people that I sort of one ends up working with in the professional world wear many hats, and so it is a very common thing, and it's always great. I know for me, when I'm an actor in a show, I'm an actor in a show, but I'm always observing as a director. I'm always learning. I'm always, how is the director working with the actor? How is the director working with the designers? Like, what is happening right now? But I've learned to keep to stay in my actor, lane, and just observe. So I feel like, many hats to be worn. Why not?
That's a great point. I offer that because in this tonight, you'll see the gifts of both Gregory as writer and director. So when you hold both hats, when you have sort of a complete vision on both the textual and also the literal imagistic sense, how was that for you? I mean, you've had that experience in other pieces.
Yeah,
but how was
I can't really separate it because I'm an actor, and so I never trained as a writer. So when I started the play without really knowing how to write a play. So I would write and I'd get to a real problem, and sometimes the problems were fixable, and sometimes they were not. Sometimes they were like, "You cannot solve this problem. You need to abort, start again." So that happened. So it was just sort of trying again. And so, as you sort of described earlier, I can see it in my head. That was the experience. I could see the play in my head. I didn't have the experience and the practice, or maybe the confidence to know that I could write it down and achieve what I saw in my head. But that's been the last 10 years of work, and working with incredible artists who know how to support and to ask the right questions and to encourage and when to discourage. So I feel like it has been directing it and writing it. I helped, I created it. That's the way I kind of think about it, because I can't really separate. Because sometimes you're like, this is a better word than this word, but I'm really just trying to put to words put words on a page to give to actors so that they can understand what it is that we're trying to do.
Absolutely. And at the core of it is the deep, deep collaboration of all theater that you see on our stages and any other stage. Theater is such a collaborative art form in the early development processes, the workshops. In creating your vision for this, could you speak a little bit about your artistic collaborators? How did you come to identify the key collaborators along the way to join you on this journey?
Well, I think most significantly would be the actors. So I wrote this play specifically for a group of actors, many of whom you will see in an hour or so. And so, I went through the training program at Soul Pepper called the Academy, and I was mentored by Nancy Pock and did many shows with Oliver Dennis, Bill Webster. These are all old stalwarts at Soul Pepper. And so I spent many, many years with them in dressing rooms, on stage, in rehearsal halls. And I wrote these parts for them. The parts of them that I love, the parts of them that I love when they access. When Nancy accesses a certain part of herself that I see in social settings, I find it so charming, and I was like, other people should see this. So, you sneakily write little things into plays, and so the collaborators really came along as, I wrote it for them, and then people joined along the way, which has been amazing, which has been really, really great, and, as it has gotten bigger and bigger, more people have joined, and it's been really lovely.
It's a true love letter.
Yeah.
It is. Really, in watching it in dress rehearsal and back at next stage, it really felt like a love letter to a group of actors, but also to a future generation of artists. Could you speak a little bit about finding the young artists and working with them? I only dropped this as a bit of a breadcrumb for you. As you watch tonight, there's almost like there's a story over top what you see in terms of the fairy tale of how the intergenerational artists come together to tell the story. So could you speak a little bit about the younger cohort?
Sure, yeah. So the cast is sort of made up primarily of 4 older actors, then 3 younger actors who play a bunch of different characters. And that was always the kind of concept that these, and to have the young actors both be, how do I say this? To support in the playmaking, but also as characters really be the antagonizing force against the older generation. And so there are 3 incredible, lovely actors who you'll see tonight who my favorite thing inviting them into the room was to see them watch Nancy and Oliver and Bill work. Do the thing that happened to me when I was at Soul Pepper, going to the rehearsal halls and just watching them work. Because you train as an actor and you're with people your own age, you graduate, you might get a job, and if you do, that's great. Most people don't. And so you never really get to see how real professional actors work unless you're very, very lucky. And I felt very lucky to see that. So that's been a wonderful thing to bring them in to the rehearsal hall, to watch them fall in love with these older actors, to learn from them and sort of pass that on. So I feel like the show also helps to do that. And if I were really lucky and the show had a future life and it was done elsewhere, that this would also happen, that there would be a group of 4 older actors and you'd need 3 younger actors in, so that would kind of create a little exchange that allows for just passing on of knowledge and experience.
Mm-hmm. I remember you saying something to me again really early on that you said your vision was that the older people were standing there and the younger people were moving around them. And in the staging of it at next stage, that came back to me as I was watching it. And there was something invigorating about watching the younger actors are like,
go, yeah.
And the older people are moving more slowly, and it's a really beautiful counterpoint in the piece.
It is.
Yeah.
And in working on Wicked Next back at YPT, there was also an intergenerational cast. And in terms of that experience, how did that?
It wasn't. Yeah, you're right. I think we hired the guy who played Mr. Green, who was the spirit of nature. We hired an actor called Michael Spencer Davis. And he had written to the theater, this works. I didn't even know this worked. He'd written to the theater the week before we lost the actor who was going to play him. And the director said to me, he just wrote me a letter. Do you know him? And I was like, no. Is he the right age? Yes, he's the right age. And then we called people to say, okay, tell us about him. And everybody said, he's marvelous with younger actors. He's the most, and so he had that same role among these people. They were just out of school, the two youngest people, working with Christine Horn and with Michael and with JD. And so there was this, there was this beautiful intergenerational thing that happened. And something that I loved in the story, that I deeply love in that story, is that the main character is about 6 years old. And in the end, he discovers that his younger brother has come back to the community, but his younger brother is now 55. So he's the older brother, but he's 6, and the younger brother is 55 because of fairy time. And there was something just marvelous about brothers who were that far apart and yet had shared. There was something in that intergenerational thing between them that I adored.
Thank you, Paula. Do keep watch tonight as you watch for this intergenerational story underneath the story, or very much of the story. I wanted to bring up something that you wrote so beautifully in the creator's note. It's a quote from Wilhelm Grimm himself, describing fairy tales as fragments of ancient faith whose purpose was to awaken the feelings of the human heart. And so I wanted to return to fairy tales in talking about the human condition, or the fairy tale as a morality tale, or sometimes that there's a lesson to impart. Could you speak a little bit about how in adapting fairy tales for the stage that you also wrestled with this necessity for a moral, or the genre, and retrofitting it for a genre?
Yeah, I think, in the Bremen Town Musicians, there's no moral in that. It's just a story of 4 old animals who are, about to be killed, and so they say there must be something better than death, and so they go to Bremen to become musicians. They never make it to Bremen, and that's the end of the story. But this is a very popular story throughout cultures across the world, this idea of 4 older animals or lesser animals, making their way, deciding, for themselves to take control of their lives and move on. So one of the things I wanted to do was to not create too many morals with the show, but to really pose the questions that exist that I kind of wrestle with, and there are no easy answers. How do you let people be themselves? Even when they're really difficult people? How do you allow people to fail gracefully? How do you make space for yourself and for others? How do you try to take control of a life that you have no control of? So these are the things that I wanted to scratch away at with humor.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Gregory. How about for you, Paula?
It's a different, you have a different, imperative when you're writing for children, which is you want to end on a hopeful note. And I was just thinking that one of the last lines of the play is that the old man, who's his younger brother, wants him to come and live in a house, and he says, but everything will change if I live in the house. I won't be able to hear the birds and know what they're saying. There'll be too many changes. And his brother says, everything always changes. And I wanted the ending to be, they found each other. It's not going to be perfect, but that they found a way to go forward together. And my siblings are deeply important to me, and I think I wanted to sing that relationship of even when you're estranged and crazy, crazy age difference, and that I don't know if that's a moral exactly, but Nix has to give up the idea, as you were saying, of being a fairy, but he can still take everything he learned from that into the next part, and that's what I wanted to leave the kids with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In both those answers, what really jumps out to me, and it's also from chatting with other dramaturgs, is that when we work with playwrights, there's often like you said, peeling back the layers of answers and getting to the question. What is the question that we wish to leave audiences with, rather than giving an answer or telling this is the way to live a life. And so in both those answers, there is that, the raising of the questions. What's perhaps a question this time around in re-examining Bremen Town that has appeared more fully to you?
I don't know if I have an answer to that question. Something that is sort of like a question that the play poses?
Yes.
The question that I know the answer to this question, but the question that it keeps asking is, why does everything have to end? Why do all the good things have to end? And it's a melancholy question, and the play kind of exists in that.
Hold that in your mind. Thank you. That's really great. And in working on Bremen Town from the early stages, what were some of the questions that surfaced then that you see it manifest in the production?
Definitely the thing of what is all this, particularly with Frau Ezel, what is all this mastery for if you're just abandoned at the end? What is all that, everything I knew, and it's gone? And that question I found very, very resonant. And also the question in is it Herr, who is the Oliver Dennis character?
Hund.
I was going to say Hund, and then I doubted.
You got nervous. I understand.
I got nervous. But Herr Hund is like a total failure. He's a total failure, and yet he's the most optimistic. He's the most. I have, God love him, but I have a hapless brother. And I look at Herr Hund, and I have a Herr Hund for a brother. And I look at that character, and he drives me crazy. But I love him. He has so much life in him. And the question of how can those two things be? This total life, like life to the fingertips, and mess everywhere, mess all the time, you know? And that there's something in those characters. How is it that they are the age they are and they still have their child? They're still like children. How is that? What a mystery.
What a mystery.
You know, like for me, the play really grappled with the mystery of people.
Yes. Yes.
And what does a life mean?
Yes.
You know?
My yeses come with great optimism and enthusiasm for the power of Bremen Town, and so much great stories and theater and mediums is the power of recognition. When we see ourselves in those questions or in those characters, when we identify them with sometimes family or friends or theater family, real family. In your creator's note as well, you also spoke about how some of these stories or the inspiration for how you wrote this trickled from your matriarchal lineage. Could you speak a little bit about some of those stories that were passed down and how that inspired you?
Sure. You know, growing up, my grandmother was my favorite person in the entire world. And on the weekends, I would stay at her place. And I had the best time of my life with her. And I loved her. And she was so funny privately, but publicly very composed. And I didn't know this until I was older. And so my favorite thing was just listening to the stories that she would tell, or around the table with my mom and my dad. And like, these are my favorite things. And my parents know that I am the sucker for these kind of things, little objects around the house. They'll take them off a shelf that they want to get rid of. And that my brother and my sister, they don't want any of this junk. But for me, they'll say, this was your great-grandmother's. And I'll say, I have to take it home with me. And I take it home with me. So I collect all these things, whether, you know, little objects, things, stories. And so the play is made up of, you know, it's made up, you know, there's a plot, there are characters, a story, but it's, you know, the material of it, the scraps of the quilt are just stories that my family, that go through my family. Stories about my great aunts, my great grandmothers, stories about my dad, my mom, and things that they said to me and to each other. And so it's filled in that way. And I think of this play often like a table at a flea market. It's just full of junk. Stuff that you'd recognize that you don't care for because you already have those. Who has ashtrays anymore? But just ashtrays and little crystal things and glasses and garbage that you don't want, that everyone has too much of, but they have no value unless you pick it up and you know the story of it. And I feel like that's what the play is for me. And the characters are this way too. So that is, that's how I feel about the creation of the play, but then also the people themselves. This is a room full of people. And if you scratch away at any of us, I'm sure we have some pretty fascinating stories to tell each other, but we don't because we're polite. And, that's just not what we're here to do. But I feel like that's the play for people who you would pass on the street and not think twice about, or be like, what a weirdo, and then leave. But unless you know their story, you don't really know them.
Thank you. Do you find that the textures of how your familial life sometimes appears in your playwriting as well? Is that an inescapable thing of being a playwright?
I totally get that. Yeah, I would say it appears in my apartment more. My sister and I had like a set to, because she's less sentimental than me. And I had my grandfather's kettle, and when it boiled, the water went everywhere. And when you poured it, it was just, and she finally said, "This is the worst kettle in history. I'm getting you a new kettle." And I was like, "This is Grandpa's kettle." She said, "It's a piece of crap." I tell you, but I find those objects hold the person in a certain way. And in terms of, I think my plays are full of really good lines that other people have said, but I get the credit.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Leaving on that note around questions and family, as part of our Tarragon family, I wanted to open the floor now to see if perhaps you have any questions for our esteemed guests.
You don't have to.
Yeah, there's also absolutely
it's
no
not mandatory.
It's not mandatory. We're okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the themes are so wonderful to have. I really feel it's so important for us to have more representation of older, our elders, and also the question of, you gain all this knowledge. I've been thinking about that as an artist, even though I'm in my 30s, and I feel sometimes like I'm 65. But I think about that, that we're working so hard, you're training, but then I see, how our culture treats our elders, and I find it so sad that it's, again, so much knowledge, and so much obsession with prolonging life, but not knowing how to care for that life. I think that's such an important part, such a discussion that we don't have as a culture in Western society and Eastern culture. That's a very, very important part of our culture, that we really care for our elders and give our elders, that sense of elders are much more listened to, and there's much more, it's not the culture, Western culture is very obsessed with young people all the time. It's always about the generation coming up. But there's something I feel very, very flawed in that dynamic, that how can you just always be obsessed with young people? Because we have to be obsessed with both. We have to be obsessed with both sides, right? We can't just be obsessed with the young person coming up. And so, I think I wanted to ask more about that dynamic of, were you also feeling, Gregory, that that's missing, the elder, that representation in general, the story?
Not necessarily missing, but I felt like there was a lot of anxiety. This is going to sound really stupid, so I apologize. But I'm always fascinated by being I thought when I was older this would be solved, or I'd understand this, or I know this. And the older I get, I know less and less. And this anxiety, which I thought would be gone by the time I hit whatever age, was not gone. And then seeing people who I admired, who are very successful, who at what they do, who have their lives together with this anxiety, I thought, oh wow, that's interesting to me. That's a bit of a mystery. So it was more about poking away at those things that maybe never go away. And that's why I kind of chose the folk fairy tale as well. They're meant for children, but then they're meant to scare children. And I thought, what about a play that's meant to scare adults in a really fun way, a fun scare? I guess.
Paula, what do you feel like about what do you feel is important for that representation as well?
I do. It's great to see. I was just thinking about, I went in 2015 to India because Ankita insisted. And I have never felt safer in my life than I felt there because of my hair. Everybody was, Auntie, are you okay? Auntie, let me take you there. Everybody. And the nature of that care from strangers, which is the antithesis in a way of what happens in Bremen Town, was striking to experience. And I recognized that I don't experience it. That I experience, oh my God, I can't believe you're still alive. And that I think the representation of that as fully, that you have journeys to make, you have discoveries to make in your 70s, in your 80s. You know, that there's, my grandmother made jam when she was 91 in the home. And when I went to the room to find her, she was giggling. And I said, what's so funny? And she said, I never made jam. And now I'm going to eat this jam one day, like that I made. And I think the representation of, there are many adventures after, you know, the adventures that are most often portrayed in our art forms. It's great to see something that affirms that.
Yes.
Sometimes they're hard adventures, like you, but
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, it's kind of following up on that one. Gregory, I wonder if you have any hesitation about writing for a generation that's older than yourself. In other words, you're not drawing obviously from life experience.
You're so young.
From observed experience, but I wonder if you ever had any hesitation about, because a lot of representations of older people tend to veer towards the sentimental. They trivialize the fact of age and rarely deal with the imminent mortality that age represents. I mean, it's the greatest, moment of wisdom you could say this also when you realize that you don't have that much time left.
Sure.
And I think that, I definitely felt that in the play I've seen before, spoiler alert. But I just wondered if you could say a little bit about that process for you.
Yeah, I think I did have, I had a great excuse that it was a folk tale. It was a fairy tale, so if things were kind of wobbly or off, I could be, it's just a fairy tale, we just embrace it, which is just lazy writing. But to answer that, yes, I did, but I feel like we, with the collaborators that have been working on it, Paula, Nancy, Oliver, Bill, have been working on it for so long that, every step of the way, just checking in to be like, okay, this is feeling right, this feels, and there are things that might have been, I put in there that I could just see that they were not picking up, they were just not, and I was like, okay, we don't need to talk about it, I can just see, I'll just remove that. So carve it from observing. So I did have I feel more nervous now that it's up than I did creating it. Because in the heat of creation, you're creating, you're solving problems, you're doing things. And now I go, am I am writing about a generation that I'm not part of. And so I just hope that it has some truth to it because it's been fostered by observing my family, observing my senior colleagues, and just scratching away with it with like a little fingernail of like.
Hoping to win the lottery.
Exactly. Yeah. Of just of also like imagination, allowing the imagination to inspire. I don't know if that's a very good answer to that question, but
It is.
I just wonder if the player has I'm an amateur artist, I've never sold anything, but one of the problems with a creative piece of art, let's say acrylics or whatever, is how do you know when you're finished?
yes.
And,
Great question.
Should I add this, should I add more color, maybe more detail here, and similarly writing a play with a purpose,
Yeah.
how do you know when you've accomplished that? Was it part of the collaboration? that you get feedback on that?
Yeah, there's always feedback, whether you want it or not. And people, you know, and you know, once it starts going, we had a week of previews where we were rehearsing during the day, performing it at night, and then, you know, so it was in the air, so people could respond, and you're learning what people laugh at where they seem to be bored. But where to stop is, the classic answer is like opening night. Opening night is when it stopped. You know, I can't give them any notes, but I'm taking notes in my head of like, this little bit of dialogue is still not quite right. The great thing about working with great actors is there comes a time where you have to leave them alone, because they are great. So they will know the answers to things that I don't even know are questions yet. So I have to stop and let them go. So my work has to stop. So that's kind of a feeling where like, oh, you're ready for me to just leave. So, but it's a tricky thing. And my dad was a visual artist, and we have some beautiful paintings of his, and we have some paintings where he should have stopped.
Mine in the basement.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's where those are too.
How about for you, Paula? Do you ever have a sense?
I think that's really such a great question, and I think it is opening night, and there's always, I have a play that's been on my desk for 35 years or so, various iterations, and there's always, I did a pass of it recently, and the director said to me, yeah. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, well, it's good. I mean, it was good before, and it's good now. And I said, is that stop? And he said, yeah, kind of. Just have a seat, you know. And I think there are things you just have to say, okay, you're done in whatever, and maybe if you come back, maybe if there's another production. I was fascinated to hear you did some writing during the preview week.
I did on the weekend.
I'm fascinated by that. What, can I ask?
Yeah.
What was it that you...
That
late in the game?
Yeah, there are two sections. One was a transition that was just taking too long, and one was story beats that were, I played the same story beat twice, and I didn't know until I saw it in previews a few times. I was like, this happens twice within 5 minutes. Why is this happening? Oh, the writer.
that damn writer.
And so, you know, I edited that, and so that the cutting was a little bit easier. The adding the text, and this is, you know, with all. So I did some rewrites. So we added some new text in just to a kind of a thing that, but it also, it felt right. I was like,
Yeah, it feels like.
I saw it and I was like, oh, this is the right thing to do.
But Nick's that I worked on, which was an adaptation, I went to rehearsal going, my work is done. Thank you, tip your waitresses. And I was rewriting, I was stunned by it. And I mean, I've been in the business a few minutes, and I thought, what? And they were always, like the director was always calling me and going, okay, I have 5 pages of adjustments. You know, like they were teeny. They were, this page, please switch these 2 lines. This page, but there were all kinds of small mechanical things right up to the opening that we were messing around with, and that I think were very helpful to the final thing. But when the audience comes, I always like to say to my students, the audience is the last character. They show up at the end. They know everything. And they are always right. Whatever they see, you have to listen to that they're right. So we had a lot of audiences in the previews that taught us a lot of things. The same way yours did.
Same. And it was fun doing the rewrites because there are certain actors within the group that are great with rewrites and certain actors that are not great, because we were rehearsing it and then putting it into the show that night. And so it was a fun game to be like, here are the list of actors that can handle new text. Here are the list of actors who cannot. Here are the list of actors, if I give them a new cue to their line, that will not, I won't be setting them up for success. So how do I rewrite this little scene, but give you these people the new lines, but that person's line, the cue has to be the same as it was before. So it was a bit of a fun math problem. And the great compliment that I feel like I received is when, I stressed about this, bringing new stuff in. We were halfway through our previews. I brought it in, and one of the actors said, "What did you change?" And that was a great note, because I was able to kind of fix some things, do some things that needed to happen.
Beautiful.
But he didn't feel it internally. And I said, well, that's because I wrote around you. So your journey is exactly the same, but everyone else's changes anyway. But being silly, but.
That's great.
Thank you both, and thank you for that question. Any other questions? I think we have time for one more, if there's time. Or otherwise, thank you so much for attending our Tarragon Talk. Enjoy Bremen Town tonight. Please join me in thanking my guests.